Hello, my friends. I'm Rick, the True Seed Table. I got gray and white mama sitting here next to me. She took her 45 minutes to calm down, but she finally calmed down a little bit anyway. So we are looking at the BattleTech Force Manual Davion for Catalyst Game Labs. This is one of the newest releases. It was graciously given to me, and I'm grateful for it because I'm not going to have money this year. It's going to be a bad year for me. Anyhow, Force Manual Davion, and I went through it, and I wish I could have printed it out in color because it really snaps. It really stands out better in color. One of the things that kind of leapt out to me right after I got through most of it, I started to realize that they seem to have left out the Word of Blake era and the Dark Age era and the Republic of the Sphere era, and I don't see any reference in here for the current, you know, era. Just thought that was curious. Now I'm sure there was a reason to it, and they maybe even told us about it, and I may even been, read about it or heard about it. But for the love of me, I cannot think of why. It just seems odd that historically speaking, that the current version of of any force manual for the game would not be set in the current setting unless it's specifically for a different setting. Now, this doesn't say, the FedCom Civil War era or the War 3039 era or the Operation whatever era. It just says what it said. So maybe I don't know, whatever. Right? There's a lot of good stuff in here, though. The read was very interesting. It was a bit entertaining, although a bit dry for me because you can read the history of any of the great houses repeatedly over the lifetime of the game system. If you think about it, how many versions of the history have you read for House Davion? I mean, I have the original House Davion house sourcebook, so I can go back to the very beginning and you'll see some evolution from system to system sometimes and sometimes not. Sometimes it's just a lot of repetitive stuff, and there's nothing new and exciting added to the flavor. And sometimes there are, and that's the trick. That's always the trick because they're not like a cut and paste from an earlier version. They're actually a rewritten version of the previous version, which nuances make changes in how things are said or not said, or the word choices, verbiage, things like this. So we got the Land of Six Liberties, the Succession Wars, a Brief Peace, Federated Suns, circa 3025. Right, I got that in here. No mention of Dark Age, Republic of the Inner Sphere, or Word of Blake and you know what I'm saying. None of that in here. Operation Giraro. So initial panic plan invasion, blah blah blah. Then we get into the rank and file, the uniforms and combat divisions. They acknowledge that they're not covering all of the divisions because the Federated Common Self has a very large military and a lot of units are not listed. And that's typical. I mean, there are units that, if you look at the sheer number of military units that the source books attribute to a given house, the actual shown units that are listed rarely equal to that number. And that was a calculated design or an accident. I want to believe it was a calculated design to leave room for people to come up with our own stuff that we can then interject into our version of the setting. All right. But what do I know? Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think? So we got the Davion Brigade of Guards. When I was doing Battle Force, I had all of these things trucked out. I had the entire things. I had all the units. I had made the little cardboard pieces. I made my own using a file cabinet. The folders from file cabinets, and then I had one for every one of the guards. And then I would have, I think, the equivalent of if you look at the maximum number of support regiments and stuff. So there was like some of them have like 4 infantry regiments. I had them all tricked out. I really did. I had them all tricked out The only difference is I chose, instead of having multiple iterations of the same thing, I just had the Brigade of Guards Infantry Regiment 4 and Regiment 2, and I just borrowed them and applied them to the main unit whenever I needed them, kind of stuff. Which was it took me a long time to create all those things too. I can tell you. I don't know how many months and months of doing it. Avalon, Hussars, and of course they're not all represented. And once again, there's still some of the information is just very basic. So, if you're a big fan of the Federated Commonwealth and you already have a pile of source books, this really is kind of redundant in that aspect. I hate to say that, for when it comes to this portion of the book, this is more geared to new players and people who don't have a huge wall of stuff sitting home somewhere. And yes, we're going to start this now. Okay, you got to get off. No, you're not going to lay on the paper. I'm sorry, but you're not going to do that. No, you gotta have. No, you're not gonna. No, you're not gonna. No, and you're not gonna listen to a word I say either, are you? Come on. Oh, this. No, come on. You can't do that. I need space. You can't do that. I don't care. I can't do that. I can hurt a cat, you know. Yes, I can. So we go through the basics and things like that, and there's a good representation of the core units that you'll find. A few explanation of independent brigades. It even explains that you're not going to find everything here in the book, and you probably shouldn't have that expectation in the first place. But you get into the rules, amendments. I don't get too much into these that much because, once again, I haven't played any of these versions of the current versions of rules, so I'm not excited by one thing or another. I've read through some of them, and it's just kind of common sense, makes sense. We get into the section on creating unit organizations. I get a little bit more animated about building companies, building formations. I think this is uh, it's good stuff to have in here. And when you talk about amendments, that's one of those things you have to challenge your group and whoever comes to your table. Well, we're going to use this particular set of rule books, or this particular rule set, but I want to include these amendments. Well, everybody has to be on board with it, know what those amendments are, or be accepting of your decisions or your suggestions anyway. New rules amendment, Davion Lance formations, available mech warriors. Then we get into availability lists, and this is just basically logistics. This is the boring stuff for some people. This is logistics. One of the things that really struck me too was, once again, the representations that they have for mechs in here are, the artwork's slicker, I grant you, but these are, you know, 30 or 2020 or 3025 stuff. I mean, here's is 3034 is the oldest date they got listed in here. So is this a retro leap back towards the early induction era of 3025, and we're ignoring what ain't happened yet? Because there's no advanced technology in here that I can see. No Clan or Star League era equipment or weapon systems on these things. These are pretty much the standards that we operated with at the beginning of the game. Just nicer art, or updated art, right? So that comes back to that section where they talk about for your painting schemes. It gives you the examples of the unit color schemes. Once again, it would have been nicer if I could have done that one in color. I could have, but it would have been a pain in the butt, and I did not want to burn through a cartridge of color and I had to explain that to the boss lady. So anyway, that is Freedom Sword. No, I mean, Force Manual Davion. I am looking forward to seeing the others when I can get my hands on them. I'm probably grateful that I didn't actually buy a physical copy myself, because while it looks nice and pretty, I can't justify the expense for what the content that's in here. I personally cannot justify the expense of it. So anyhow, I hope you guys have yourself a great new coming up the end of the month. The 1st of November's coming. Got Halloween coming up. Hope you guys have a great experience if you celebrate it. If you don't,